Migrants making the dangerous trek to the shores of Italy continue to be a major problem for the European Union. The United Nations Refugee Agency says the core of the European migrant crisis is in Libya. On Friday, 1,400 migrants arrived by boat in Italy's Catania port. The migrants disembarking a Coast Guard ship were part of more than 4,000 people who have been plucked from boats in the Mediterranean Sea over the past few days. Their arrival comes as the Italian government, looking to stem the flow of migrants into the country, has drawn up a draft code of conduct for non-government organizations operating in the Mediterranean. Now, the 11-point plan is expected to be presented in the coming days to some 9 NGOs who regularly deploy rescue boats to international waters just off the Libyan coast.
So we really hope that a code of conduct will have the spirit to have and embrace all the subjects, the NGOs, the merchant vessels, and all the subjects that even the military that are there rescuing these people. And we should not forget, however, that the real core of the problem is not the presence of an NGO in the central Mediterranean, but the core of the problem is before. The core of the problem is about thousands of people that are adrift in Libya, not at sea, but in Libya and Niger, and that are risking to put their lives in the hands of smugglers.
Well, now, Libya spiraled into turmoil after the 2011 overthrow of ruler Muammar Gaddafi. Since then, rival governments and armed alliances have been competing for power. A UN-backed government in Tripoli has struggled to impose its authority and has been rejected by factions in the east. Now, the political chaos and security vacuum has allowed Islamist militant groups to gain a foothold and human traffickers to thrive. Now, for more insight on the situation, Rhiannon Smith, Managing Director of Libya Analysis and Eye on ISIS in Libya, joins me live via Skype from Cambridge, UK. Good evening, Ms. Smith.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, now, how could the approach to solving the migrant crisis change if the focus actually shifted to the thousands of people that are adrift in Libya and Niger rather than those at sea?
I think it's important to remember that migration is a phenomenon that crosses borders, continents, entire countries, and therefore you're very right, you can't just focus on the Mediterranean. And although equally Libya is not, the source of the problem, people are coming from all over sub-Saharan Africa crossing through Libya, it's in Libya that this problem has spiraled since 2011, and increased instability and economic deterioration has meant a lot of the migrants that used to travel to Libya to work there can no longer do that because the circumstances are so poor and because there are no longer jobs there. And on the other hand, the militias who are running the trafficking rings and who are often keeping these migrants in really deplorable humanitarian conditions and are putting them onto these boats in which they often drown, are also taking advantage of this same instability, insecurity, lack of governance, and also the lack of economic stability, which means that smuggling provides a way of earning living for many of these militias.
And talking about instability in Libya, the hope was to have all Libyan armed and political factions unite in a national government. What are the prospects at the moment?
Well, so there is a UN-backed government of national accord based in Tripoli, and that does have some support. However, it has very little real power on the ground outside of Tripoli, and none really as well outside of Western Libya, and it has failed to unite all of the different factions and militias in Libya. So although there are some talks still going on, the political process has largely stalled. Now, there are some hopes that the US may be soon going to sort of reinvigorate its Libya policy, which could be very positive. However, on the other side, we have Khalifa Haftar, a general and a strong man in eastern Libya who is being supported by Egypt and the UAE. And there is a danger that what may happen is, instead of supporting different Libyan factions to try and form this elusive unity government, that what will actually happen is some of these regional powers will push for Haftar to militarily stabilise Libya and try to take over by power, which is likely to create greater conflict and actually prolong the instability and lack of governance.
Now, in Libya, ISIS or IS has featured quite prominently. What role is ISIS playing in destabilizing Libya even further, and what are the implications to the entire region?
Well, yes, so ISIS did have territory in Libya. They were quite strong. They are currently on the back foot, so they've lost most of their territory in Libya, almost all of their territory. There are still fighters there, and there are other jihadist groups as well who are equally as dangerous, Al-Qaeda-linked groups, who are still present in Libya. However, it's important to remember that they are a symptom of Libya's existing problems rather than being the reason that they were destabilised. And it's actually these kind of the instability, lack of security, marginalisation of large communities that both allows jihadist groups to gain a foothold, and we may well see ISIS regain and re-strengthen in the country. But it's these same conditions that allow the trafficking and smuggling of people across Libya, and that also make it so dangerous for many of the people that are doing this dangerous journey, whether in Libya or then making their journey onwards north across the Mediterranean.
And very quickly, you get a sense we're here for the long haul, or is this something that can be fixed in the next few months or years?
Well, I think both migration, the Libyan political situation, and jihadism, these are all problems that actually need long-term solutions. Although it's very desirable for, certainly in Europe, for example, to have an end to the migration problems, for Libya to suddenly have a stable and secure government, which means often leaning towards kind of strongman types, actually this will not solve the problems. This will be a short-term kind of band-aid fix, when really what we need is long-term investment to really get to the root of these problems in Libya and across the whole region, to really find long-term solutions that can kind of address the root problems.
Actually, one thing that has been a kind of headache to many African observers is to what extent are African nations involving themselves in both the migration crisis and also the conflict in Libya?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the conflict in Libya, there hasn't been too much involvement from sort of sub-Saharan Africa. However, the Sahel regions are playing a key role. So countries like Niger, Chad, Sudan, there are many reports of various sort of militias and mercenaries from these countries who are actively involved either with jihadi groups or with different sides of the Libyan conflict in that region. And there is a big trade in smuggling of sort of drugs, weapons, people, subsidised goods that goes on in this Sahel region. So, this is a real potential for destabilisation, not just in Libya, but in wider across the Maghreb region, and of course down further south. So I think the role that African states, particularly the Sahel states, have to play in Libya and in the wider crisis is certainly very key and hasn't really been delved into in too much detail.
Ms. Smith, thank you very much. We appreciate your perspective.
You're welcome.
Rhiannon Smith is the Managing Director of Libya Analysis and Eye on ISIS in Libya.